Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I start by acknowledging that we're here on the traditional territory of the Algonquin peoples. And Miigwech, thank you for tolerance and patience in the path of reconciliation. I also want to begin, je vais commencer avec quelques mots parce que je vais partager mon temps avec l'honorable député de Mirabel. So I'm addressing the budget this afternoon late. I have to say, there are things in the budget I like quite a lot. So I'm going to start with the things I like quite a lot and then explain why I cannot possibly, in good conscience, vote for this budget. The things we like quite a lot, yes, thank you that we have the New Democratic Party's Confidence and Supply Agreement. This has been a Green Party policy since 2015 that dental care is health care and should be part of our healthcare system. So we are pleased to see it in this budget. We also are pleased that there is a repetition of some sort of aspirational goal to deliver pharmacare to Canadians. There's not enough in this budget for me to believe it yet. We want to see the actual path to pharmacare clearly laid out and fast. Very pleased to see a number of other items here. The follow-through on childcare. Of course, I'm old enough to remember, this will be a theme, I suppose, in this speech. I start sentences, I'm old enough to remember. I'm old enough to remember in 2005 when the former Minister Ken Dryden had achieved what this now new government has done, not that new anymore, but Ken Dryden had signed agreements with every province and territory to deliver affordable childcare to every Canadian. We're many years later, it got derailed by the decision the NDP made in those days to defeat the Liberals and put Stephen Harper in place for a very long time. We lost Kyoto, we lost Kelowna, and we lost the child care plan in 2005 and the election in January 2006. So I'm really pleased that we're seeing child care back. Affordable child care is going to make a difference to every Canadian family that has children who need desperately to have that child care. I will share with members of this place that when I was a single mom, I earned $24,000 a year as executive director of Sierra Club. I spent half of it on childcare. The woman who was hired to do the childcare in a program in the neighborhood is a wonderful woman who became a good friend. Because she only earned the $12,000 a year because it was the way my salary was split in half, I paid her through a child care program. Her child care for her children was free because she only earned $12,000 a year, and I was making $24,000, and half of it was going to child care. These things are sort of unbelievable to people of good incomes like those of us in this place, all of whom are paid so handsomely as members of Parliament. I don't take it for granted. I'm pleased with much that's in this budget, and I'm pleased to see the government keep its promises in a couple of areas. Let me just say on housing, the thing that made me most pleased was to see co-op housing back on the agenda. It's not enough money. We need to do more, but there's $1.5 billion to bring back one of the most affordable, socially supportive ways that we can house ourselves is through co-ops. That's good. I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of good intentions behind things like the tax measures against flipping. I think there are many good measures, including, and this was one of the promises, to bring back and to bring in for the first time a searchable public registry for beneficial ownerships. Let's hope that helps deal with the problem of snow washing and of overseas interests buying up our housing. I think we still really need to deal with things like Airbnbs and the ability of people to buy homes, residential properties, and take them out of the marketplace. And at the same time that they're making it harder to find affordable housing for Canadian families, they're undermining the tourism business where hotels and real B&Bs have to pay staff and buy insurance and be regulated. So we do need to protect our housing market from Airbnbs, but I also think we need to protect tourism industry, employees and owners from the competition of Airbnbs. Let me move on to areas that were token and inadequate, and we need to do so much more. I think it really was a broken promise on the mental health strategies, the need for mental health, the need for addictions. The honourable member for Prince George Caribou has done so much good work on this. Why do we not have the suicide prevention line? Why do we not have supports for mental health in this budget? We should have seen them. Another key gap, because it was a commitment that was made in the Liberal platform to put $1 billion towards fresh water. This budget is such a bitter disappointment. This title comes from the Hill Times and was signed by some of Canada's leading advocates for freshwater. Ralph Pentland, who used to run Environment Canada's freshwater programs, signed this headline, signed this article, as well as Oliver Brandeis, Bob Sanford, eminent people in the field. The headline says it all: federal budget a failure when it comes to addressing the water crisis. This is one of those sentences that starts, I'm old enough to remember. Old enough to remember when I worked at Environment Canada in the 1980s. The Inland Waters Directorate in Burlington, Ontario, had a staff of 1,250 people who did nothing but work on freshwater science, regulatory, policy work. They had an annual budget of $60 million. So when this budget says, oh, we're going to provide $43 million over 5 years on freshwater and $8.7 to the new Canada Water Agency, well, I'd laugh if it wasn't so sad. You don't even begin to start adjusting dollars for inflation. This is an abject failure, and I don't know how it is that this has happened when there's such urgency and when the government had already pledged to do this. The promise of a Canada Freshwater Agency is now more than 2 years old. And here we are with flooding and drought and fires. Water policy is also climate policy, and I want to just take a moment to say to the people of southern Manitoba, people right now who are dealing with being walloped by climate crisis events, a Canada Water Agency could help anticipate, prevent, adapt, but I just want to do a shout out to those people right now because I know in Manitoba things are very tough for many families. Also, in this budget, things that are completely missing. Nothing for ground transportation. Now, many people will say, well, that's provincial jurisdiction, but so is municipal public transit. And every government, including, and it was really great that the Harper government made the gas tax a permanent, predictable fund for municipal transportation. But where are we as a federal parliament in responding to Canadians from coast to coast who've lost their bus service and whose service on Via Rail is down to an antique, occasional train that rumbles through? I'm talking about between Vancouver and Toronto, Montreal to Halifax. We have not seen any significant investment in that ground transportation in at least a decade. All the money that's gone to Via Rail in all these years has gone to the Windsor-Quebec corridor. That's great. We need decent train service in the Windsor to Quebec corridor. But we also need decent train service with spokes that run off this hub. We need bus service across Canada so that, again, this is more than transportation, this is more than climate policy. This is justice. One of the key recommendations of the inquiry for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls was that you need to be able to get access to safe and affordable public transit. So you're not hitchhiking. The most marginalized people in our society are forced into hitchhiking because we act like there's not a problem when if you want to get from Kamloops to Prince George, if you want to get from Kamloops to Vancouver, any of these routes, if you want to get from Moncton to Campbellton, you have almost no way to travel if you don't own your own car. And I'll also say for seniors and for a lot of us, being forced to drive on unsafe roads, particularly during hazardous winter blizzards, to get to a doctor's appointment doesn't suggest we're a wealthy, industrialized society. In fact, our public ground transportation system is worse than any developing country I've ever visited. Now, moving on to what else we need. There's nothing in here for the tourism sector. The hardest hit sector, I would submit the hardest hit sector in pandemic. And what we hear is there's going to be a tourism strategy developed, but there's no money in this budget for it. I think we really need to do something to make sure that since the COVID pandemic, I'll say it out loud, is not over, we better start making sure small businesses in the tourism sector can survive. But why can't I vote for this budget? Because it's a complete failure in responding to what 3 days earlier was laid out by the IPCC. On April 4th, they said, the lead author said, it's now or never. They never gave the option of later. It's now or never for a habitable planet, and this budget fails in that fundamental threat to our survival.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. There is a lot I disagree with in my honourable friend's speech. I found in particular her denunciation of Airbnbs to be a little bit odd. They're as a great affordable opportunity, especially for families to travel that have more flexibility than hotels. But I want to focus on the issue of carbon capture and storage, because the NDP, speaking previously, said that carbon capture and storage is unproven technology. I have news for the House. There's carbon capture and storage happening as we speak in my riding at a project called Quest. I was at an open house last week for a project called Polaris that is entirely private sector funded. It benefits from credits, but it does not involve any direct spending by the government. Industry is making these investments now in carbon capture and storage, and there are carbon capture and storage projects that are up and running, that are working, that are capturing carbon. So it's bizarre that some members say we don't know if it works. It's happening. Could the member acknowledge the benefits of carbon capture and storage and the positive impact that it's having?
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Well, my honourable colleague from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, first, in my riding, one of the reasons that local businesses have to close earlier and more often is that there's no affordable housing for workers to come in. And a very real concern of local businesses in my riding is that places that used to rent to summer students and workers are no longer available because they're Airbnbs. So we can pursue that conversation later. Meanwhile, the difficulty with carbon capture and storage is that it works far less than advertised. It can sequester some carbon, but in no project around the world has it ever met its goals or targets. It's about the most expensive way and one of the less reliable ways to do what's needed to be done reliably, quickly, and affordably.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Salaberry-sur-Roi.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voulais remercier ma collègue de son beau discours. Je sais qu'elle est sensible aux gens les plus vulnérables de notre société. Et je voulais lui rappeler qu'au Québec, il y a une grande fédération qui s'appelle la Fédération des clubs l'âge d'or du Québec qui réunit tous les gens de 55 ans et plus, 500 000 personnes. Ils ont demandé au gouvernement d'augmenter la pension de vieillesse à partir de 65 ans, parce que le gouvernement présent prévoit l'augmenter pour les 75 ans et plus. Peut-elle m'expliquer si elle est d'accord d'abord avec l'augmentation de la pension de la vieillesse chez les aînés de 65 ans et plus, et pourquoi, d'après elle, cet aspect est absent complètement du budget?
Député de Saanich Gulf Islands.
Merci à mon collègue de Salaberry-sur-Roi. C'est à cause de les raisons dont sa question que j'ai voté en faveur d'amendement de budget du Bloc québécois. Parce que aussi le Bloc québécois a ajouté qu'on doit avoir un programme concret contre l'urgence climatique. Mais la question de financement de nos âgés, je n'ai pas de réponse à sa question. Il manque de sens d'ignorer les besoins de nos aînés.
I have time for a brief question. The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Yes, thank you. Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if the member could provide her thoughts in regards to, she started to talk about the child care program and that we do have a national child care program. And even though at times when you see government spend money, there's many derivatives that come out of it. That particular program will generate also revenue, and it'll also have a real tangible impact on the lives of many. If she can just provide her thoughts on that.
Saanich Gulf Islands.
Well, thank you. I mean, as I reflected in my statement, virtually all my daughter's childhood, I was a single mom, and if this program had been in place, it would have been much more affordable. And early childhood education is not just, I mean, early childhood education and good childcare is not just about parking your kids somewhere. It's about actually creating an enriched educational experience for children, and it should be available to every Canadian child, regardless of the economic status of their parents or parent. And it's about time we brought this forward. It's catching up with many other countries in terms of social safety net, and let's make sure we that we continue going forward. We know this was a she session. We know a lot of people who quit their jobs were not the dads, but the moms. Not always, but a lot. We have a huge chunk of our workforce right now that isn't able to go to work till they know for sure that they have reliable childcare. So this is something that was a long time coming, and I'm really happy to see it.